Welcome to Our Voices. I have a special guest with me. He is the CEO of Fairness West Virginia. He's a good friend of mine. He is Mr. Andrew Schneider. Andrew, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, thanks, Ray. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Thank you for coming on Our Voices. Again, it's an honor to have you on. Right now, we are in the midst of Pride Month, and we want to talk about that. Before I get to my questions, Andrew, please tell the viewers something about Andrew Schneider.
So I've been the executive director of Fairness West Virginia for almost 8 years now. I've basically devoted my whole career to civil rights in general. From the moment I was in college, and I organized the first ACLU chapter at very conservative Washington Lee University, and then spent many years working for the ACLU, running the ACLU office in West Virginia, and then in Connecticut before returning to West Virginia, where I really connected with the people here, and I love this place. And so this is my second time living here, but I'm not originally from West Virginia. I was born in New York City. So West Virginia is my adopted home, but it's the place that I truly and really love. And for those of you who are not familiar with Fairness West Virginia is the statewide LGBTQ civil rights organization. We lobby for civil rights on behalf of lesbian, gay, and bisexual, transgender community. And we also, besides advocating for civil rights in the state legislature, like our signature Fairness Act legislation, which would ban discrimination in employment, housing, and public spaces, we also do a lot of work in many other areas, such as training healthcare providers to provide competent, compassionate healthcare to transgender West Virginians. We also are working with sexual assault groups to make sure that their services are LGBTQ inclusive. And we've just launched the Safe and Healthy Schools initiative to help educators and teachers throughout the state better support their LGBTQ students and prevent the very serious epidemic of bullying that plagues our society, and particularly our schools, the public schools in our state. We have the 7th highest rate of bullying in the country in West Virginia.
That's deep right there. That's deep. Andrew, again, June is Pride Month. And I know I've heard some folks, they say, you know, gosh, all these colors and everything, these rainbow colors. Pride. Please tell the viewers the history behind Pride Month.
So the first LGBTQ Pride Parade, Pride Festival, really was a parade, took place in 1970, in June of 1970. And it was in response to the riots at the Stonewall Inn in New York City, where the police raided this gay bar. And it was at a point, at sort of a pivotal point in the LGBTQ civil rights movement, because at that point, you know, not just gay people, but particularly transgender people of color, were just like, we're not going to take this anymore. We're not going to just let ourselves get arrested without a protest. And so there was a riot. It basically turned into a riot, this police raid, and the police were basically raiding these gay bars for no good reason. They were simply, you know, back then, gay people were targeted and were ostracized from society, and they were persecuted. And the police were persecuting gay people in many ways by going at the gathering spaces where gay people felt safe to congregate. And so this riot started to basically bring together LGBTQ people to publicly organize and make their presence known to society. because the fact is, humankind tends to hate what they don't know. And the progress and the way LGBTQ people have been able to make progress on civil rights is by becoming more known to their neighbors, coming out to their families, marching in these pride parades over several decades. It's this public presence that makes us less of a stranger to our neighbors, and as a result, able to obtain, more basic civil rights that most people enjoy. And so every June, in part to not only commemorate the injustices that took place at Stonewall Inn and many other places before that, but also to become more publicly visible, we've had these pride festivals and pride parades every June since 1970. And it started in the big cities like New York, and it has expanded to the small towns of West Virginia. And in a wonderful way. We have like a dozen pride festivals in this state this year.
Andrew, when you talk about the pride festivals,
Mm-hmm.
Some feel that it's a little bit too much. Some feel that when there are kids, when kids are present at these festivals, some feel that it's a little bit, is at a point where you're infringing your beliefs, your preference onto a child. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, it's everyone's right to be able to, be out in public and to be visible. It's what these pride parades are not doing anything that violate any laws. They're simply LGBTQ people exercising their basic rights to free speech and free expression. And if there are families who feel that that is objectionable, that they don't want to be around LGBTQ people, they don't have to come to the pride parades. Just as LGBTQ people don't have to go to, parades of people who hate gay people or who are prejudiced towards gay people. No one is being forced to attend someone else's parade. You attend a parade by your own choice.
So when we look at, basically what you're saying is, if you don't like it, just leave us alone. Just, go about your business.
Exactly. We're not harming anyone. We're not threatening anyone. We're simply being who we are, exercising our basic rights of humanity, of being able to enjoy life and the pursuit of happiness just like everyone else. Other people have their parades. Why can't LGBTQ people do the same? There's no difference. You have a St. Patrick's Day parade. You have Italian American parade. You have all sorts of parades, and it's part of the beautiful fabric of America that we're made up of so many different parts and so many different cultures and ethnicities and races and nationalities and sexual orientations. We should be celebrating that, not fearing it.
Andrew, when we look at, this is going to be a little hot situation right here.
Okay, I'm ready.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready for it.
All right. Now, I interviewed Kasha McDonald a few months back, and there was like a wave of Black transgender folks that were being assaulted and killed.
Mm.
So my question is, what's your stance on that? And has Fairness West Virginia done anything to help stop that? Any type of crusade to to end that?
Yeah, no, that Ray, that is one of the biggest tragedies that we face and the biggest challenges we face in the LGBTQ community. The most vulnerable people are the ones you just mentioned, that are trans people of color, and they are the victims of more violence, more attacks, more murders than any other member of our community, and probably many other groups in society. It's a real serious problem, and we've been fighting for hate crimes laws for years, since I've been with Fairness for 8 years at least. This is a law that would add sexual orientation and gender identity to the state's hate crimes law that already covers a number of categories of vulnerable groups that are targeted for violence, such as people of color, people of religious minorities, women, and many other groups are protected under our hate crimes law, but LGBTQ people still are not, even despite the stats that you just mentioned about trans people of color. So we've been advocating for that vigorously, not only in the legislative session here in Charleston for these statewide protections, but year round we talk about these issues. They're very important to us.
How much success have you gotten as CEO? And I'm sure you're a lobbyist also for Fairness West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
How much success have you gotten with the West Virginia legislature?
So we've made some surprising inroads with some of our legislation, including the hate crimes bill. We when I first started, the Republicans were swept into power for the first time in 83 years, taking control of both houses of our state legislature. And prior to that, I think our movement was focused only on Democrats because Democrats had such a large majority. They felt that, Republicans, we didn't need to worry about them. But the fact is, the only true path to LGBTQ equality and inclusion in our state, only true path would require a bipartisan approach, members of both parties supporting this. That's the only way to get full buy-in and success, when the legislature finally gets to vote on these bills. So we immediately got started working on reaching across to both aisles, to reaching across the aisle to both parties, to get Republicans as well as Democrats to support our legislation. And we can now, proudly say that we have bipartisan support of our bills. In some years, we've had more Republican support of our bills than we've had Democrats. So we've made some inroads. The one sticking point we've had is we've never been able to get the leadership of either chamber to bring the bills up for vote, even while we had the votes, at least back a couple of years ago, to pass our Fairness Act legislation. But the leadership refused to bring the bill up for vote. And it was the Republican leadership, because I think they were worried that they were going to divide their party over this kind of legislation, because there's a chunk of their party that virulently opposes LGBTQ rights, unfortunately.
So basically right now, when we look at who is for gay rights, are the Democrats and not the Republicans?
No, Republicans are for. There are a good number of Republicans who are for LGBTQ rights, but like I said, the party does not speak with one voice on this issue. There are members of the Republican Party who are dead set against LGBTQ civil rights. So there's this constant tension in the party over this issue. But our polling has found that overwhelming number of West Virginians support LGBTQ civil rights protections and support inclusion and making West Virginia welcome for everyone. By large numbers, 82% of West Virginians support LGBTQ non-discrimination. And that was a Republican-led poll, by the way, that was released at the end of last year, or beginning of this year, I mean. 82% of West Virginians support this legislation. And even among Republicans, the majority of Republicans support this legislation. It's just a few members of elected Republicans who are dead set against this, and they happen to be very loud about it. And so it makes it difficult for the Republican leadership to move forward on this legislation with such outspoken opponents of these bills in their own party, if that makes any sense.
Lots of sense. Andrew, what type of, besides the hatred, the loud talking, just the slurs and everything, what other type of backlash is the LBGTQ community facing here in West Virginia?
Well, we face, like you mentioned, violence, which is really awful. We face regular discrimination that not only offends our own human dignity, but instills fear in not just the victims of those instances of discrimination, but also the entire community as a whole. And we actually, one thing I didn't mention is we also represent victims of discrimination for free when they have been discriminated against. And we're representing a client right now, a gay man who was discriminated against when he went to return a costume at the store Spirit Halloween last October. You probably heard about it, it was in the news. And the manager of the store started calling him faggot simply because the costume that he was returning was a maid's costume. And he asked our client, why are you wearing women's clothes? And and shortly after that, he started slurring him with these anti-gay epithets. And our client, sort of knew well enough that this guy was very hostile and needed to leave the store immediately. And so as he walked out, the manager followed him. And while following him, continued to shout faggot and other anti-gay slurs at him. And at the exit of the store, while our client got into his Jeep to try to make a quick getaway because this guy was threatening him, the guy pulled off his shirt, the manager did, and he said, he threatened to fight him. He said, I'm going to fight you, and went up to his vehicle and started banging on the hood of his car. This is the stuff of nightmares. I mean, in fact, our client continues to have nightmares about this episode long after it's happened. And this is the stuff that makes other LGBTQ people fearful for their own safety. That is how awful and horrific this kind of discrimination is. I mean, people don't often realize it. They're like, oh, so you're not given, the bakery doesn't give you a wedding cake. Oh, big deal. They shouldn't have to give you a wedding cake. Well, people don't realize it in the terms that it really affects LGBTQ people. This instance should send shockwaves across West Virginia. A gay man returning an item under the return policy and ends up getting, you know, the worst kind of name calling you could do for someone who is gay, and then gets threatened with violence, worries about his life and safety over returning a costume.
Andrew, yes, that's pretty messed up. It really is.
Yeah.
Do the LBGTQ community face backlash in the workplace? And how is that in today's society right now in West Virginia?
Yeah, well, there's another case that we're not handling, lesbian who was had a stellar record with the National Guard and was essentially denied a job that she was the most qualified for, simply because she was lesbian and simply because of her sexual orientation. And that is being handled by a private law firm, and we've been advocating on her behalf, but it's not one of our cases. But there you have it. It's employment discrimination, and we expect that this woman will ultimately win her case, because we're fortunate enough that the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that employment discrimination against LGBTQ people is unlawful under the civil rights laws of the federal civil rights laws of our country.
Andrew, we talked about the backlash, the dark side of the LBGTQ atmosphere.
Yeah.
I remember
what's the positive side?
Well, here it comes. So I read an article, this is a number of years ago. I read an article that says in a magazine that the second safest place for gays to live in America, the second safest place behind San Francisco, was Parkersburg, West Virginia.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And this was a number of years ago. So I don't know.
Okay. I think that might be dated information. And this is why, because you touched on a point that I was going to actually make in a positive context, which is, we've been very fortunate because of the good people here in West Virginia to help 16 municipalities throughout the state adopt LGBTQ non-discrimination laws. And really, one of the reasons why we've actually been able to bring a lawsuit on behalf of this gay man who's discriminated against by Spirit Halloween is because Charleston happens to have one of these ordinances that bans discrimination. And there's 15 other communities, including the smallest town in America with an LGBTQ non-discrimination law, and that's Thurmond, West Virginia. And all 5 residents of Thurmond voted for the ordinance. And that's now the smallest place in the country that has LGBTQ protections. But Parkersburg, interestingly enough, was one place where we thought we were going to help their city council adopt an ordinance to protect gay people, LGBTQ people. And the city council actually voted it down. It was the first place in West Virginia to vote down a law banning discrimination. And we heard in the course of testimony before the city council that people were getting discriminated against in Parkersburg. I remember a story of a woman who said that when she went looking for housing and was shown a number of housing options when she was there by herself, when she returned with her same-sex partner, suddenly those housing options vanished. They were no longer available for her. And it was clear that it was because of her sexual orientation.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
I have a few more questions,
Sure.
Andrew, and we'll let you go. I know you have a busy schedule. Does Fairness West Virginia do you all partner with other civil rights groups for diversity, equity, and inclusion, like the NAACP? Do you?
Oh yeah, we're actually participating in the NAACP's Juneteenth celebration here in Charleston.
Okay. Okay. One other issue I want to talk to you about, another touchy subject.
Mhm.
I interviewed Joshua Higginbotham,
Yes.
and we talked about his run for his seat in the
In the Senate?
legislature, in the Senate.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, the big topic was the young lady, Andrea Kiesling.
Yep.
Her situation was she moved back. She hasn't been here 5 years, so that which made her ineligible. And I asked Joshua his thoughts on that. And he told me he gave me his views. Here's my view right here. I feel that the GOP has really turned their back on him. Now, in today's
Did he
time,
agree with that position?
huh?
Did he agree with that opinion?
Well, I asked him what he thought, and he said that there was some that had his back. He was, you know, he was okay with it, that had his back. And I didn't want to push the issue, but I respect his opinion. The GOP now, Andrew, in my opinion, has really gone nuclear. They have gone back 50, 60 years in time. They want to repeal certain laws. They stripped parts of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. They want to repeal Roe v. Wade now. No telling what is coming next. We look at the anti-abortion bill.
Yeah.
And a lot of these topics have started in other states, and some way, somehow, it got here to West Virginia. And I mean, we're like a copycat state.
Copycat in some respects, not every.
Yes. Yeah.
We could copy a lot more positive things, I think, here in West Virginia.
Right. But as long as there's a supermajority with the GOP, with the governor, both chambers of the legislature, Secretary of State, Treasurer, Attorney General, all of that, you know, again, it's hard. And of course, then the state Supreme Court, predominant GOP, it's hard to really get anything through. Mm-hmm. So when I look at Joshua's situation, we look at the GOP, I think, personally, I think and normally the GOP, they stick up for one another, no matter how right you are or how wrong you are, they're going to stick up for you. But I believe in this case right here, in Joshua's case, I feel that they have really turned their back on him because he came out as openly gay. What are your thoughts about that?
I think there are some Republicans who happen to have significant bases of power now that won't have Josh's back, you know, that are out to get people like Josh. But I don't believe that that's the case with the party as a whole. I mean, let's look at our situation. You know, if we hadn't done any outreach to Republicans, you know, going back 8 years when I started with Fairness, we would have been slaughtered the last legislative session. I mean, there were 24 anti-LGBTQ bills introduced in the legislature. And like you said, these were a lot of copycat bills from other states. Many of those bills passed in other states, but we were somehow able to defeat every single one of them. We were unscathed at the end of this past session this year. And it was because we have relationships with some Republicans and some Republicans in important positions of power. And so that does yield some benefits. Now, I would love it in a perfect world. I would love that to translate to the passage of bills that we desperately need, like the Fairness Act, or like the Angels Law, which is our hate crimes bill, or like the bill that bans the dangerous and discredited practice of conversion therapy that harms our minors. That would be, that would be wonderful if we could have all of that. But we have to, we can only, play with the cards that we're dealt with. And right now we have a Republican supermajority that has a lot of anti-LGBTQ members that are a part of that supermajority, but they're not in the anti-gay members of the Republican Party are not in the majority of the Republican Party. Otherwise, we would have been beat. They would have, passed, many of their bills, many of the bad bills that they introduced, and they weren't successful at it. We prevailed. So, I feel badly for Josh. I wish he had, he's a friend of mine. I wish he had won his race. But I know that Josh is not done with politics, and Josh will come back probably even stronger than he was before. I mean, there's that saying that whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And Josh, I know, is a fighter, and is not going to leave politics after that one loss. He'll be back for sure.
One last question.
Yeah.
I'll wrap it up. So we talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Schneider, as CEO of Fairness West Virginia, what is the current state of the LBGTQ community, and where do you want it to be in 5 years?
Okay. Well, we currently have had lots of success with these municipal laws that ban discrimination that we call fairness laws, municipal fairness laws. We've gotten 16 of them, and like I said, they're in the very small towns of West Virginia, but they're also in the big cities in West Virginia. And one year, by the way, back in 2016, we helped 5 municipalities adopt these non-discrimination laws. And when Wheeling became the 5th one that year to unanimously approve such a law, a national organization informed me that West Virginia municipalities adopted more of these laws than any other state in the country. Can you believe that? We adopted more municipal LGBTQ non-discrimination laws than anywhere else in the country in 2016. That's something to be very proud of. And I'm certainly proud of that. And so we're continuing to get these municipalities to move forward, and it inches us closer to our goal, because it's a painstaking process going town and city by town and city. Right now we're with 16 municipalities that covers roughly 200,000 people, which is 12% of our population of 1.8 million. So we have a long way to go. And if we're continuing to do this city and town by city and town, it's going to take us a long time to protect everyone. So that's why we really need the legislature to act, to pass the statewide Fairness Act, so that all of us can be covered and we don't have to go town and city by town and city. We also are hopeful that the federal government, that Congress, can do their part in passing the federal version of this. The legislation that's been introduced is called the Equality Act, but we're currently working on compromise language that balances religious freedom protections with LGBTQ protections, because we don't believe that they're in conflict with each other. We believe that you can protect people of religious faith and also people who are LGBTQ at the same time. And so we've been actually getting together with a group of red states throughout the country, red state equality groups, to form this coalition with some more conservative churches in this country to provide a united front in favor of passing this, compromise legislation that protects both religious liberty and LGBTQ civil rights. So in 5 years, I hope we have these protections, not just in West Virginia, but throughout the country. So, no one should have to fear about, not being kicked out of their home or being thrown out of a business or public establishment simply because of who they are, who they love. That's what we struggle with today. That's our challenge. And that's what we hope to resolve in 5 years or sooner by getting these laws passed.
Andrew, I'm done.
Okay.
I
talked your ear off.
No. Hey, this is our voices. You gave me your voice.
All right.
You're sharing your voice.
You asked for it and you got it.
Thank you. Now, before I let you go,
yeah,
I'm gonna give you 1 minute to say what's on your mind. Just final thoughts. Kind of wrap it up. We'll give you 1 minute, okay?
Okay.
Ready?
Yeah.
Go.
Well, I hope everyone has an opportunity to enjoy this wonderful Pride Month here in West Virginia. It's really been heartening and full of promise to see West Virginia have a dozen Pride festivals throughout the state, and contrast that to when I first started with Fairness 8 years ago, and there was only one Pride festival here in Charleston. Now you can go to Elkins, you can go to Parkersburg, you can go to Huntington or Martinsburg, you can go to Berkeley Springs or Fairmont and celebrate Pride, because they all are having organized Pride festivals. And if you missed last weekend where there were Pride festivals in Charleston, Martinsburg, and Parkersburg, you can actually catch another Parkersburg Pride Festival next weekend. And the weekend after that, you can catch the Pride Festival in Fairmont. And then the final weekend in June will be the Pride Festivals in Lewisburg, in Elkins, and Berkeley Springs. And there's actually a new one that's being organized in Hurricane in Putnam County. So go out to the Pride Festivals, have a good time. It's not just a time to enjoy yourself, but it's also a time to help, join us in the fight for these basic civil rights to make West Virginia a more greater, inclusive, welcoming place.
All right. Andrew Schneider, CEO of Fairness West Virginia, thank you very much for coming to Our Voices. You take care, okay?
Thanks, you too, Ray. Thanks for having me on here.
Don't go anywhere. Hold on.
Okay.